This is the DRF Players Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the DRF Players Podcast. This is show 275, the Tuesday, October 10th edition. I'm your host, Peter Thomas Fornatal, back with you in the Brooklyn bunker once again as we're really entering prime time for this Breeders' Cup season. Another big round of prep races this weekend in the books. We're going to talk about those on the show, maybe answer a couple of listener questions. Before we get to that, I must introduce my co-host, as usual, calling in from the planet Texas. He's the people's champion, Jonathan Kinchin. JK, what's up?
Man, I like it when you say that after I have rough weekends. I didn't. It reminds me that I could still maybe pick a horse or two. What's funny is I got beat in a little bit trying to qualify for Keeneland on DRF tournaments. However, I saved myself a little bit with some head-to-head action to not make the dent so bad. So it worked out. Fun weekend.
So you did. I noticed that you had 3 of the 21 entries in the big Keeneland qualifier on Saturday. Eventually, Stephen Meyer and Mike McIntyre making their way out of that event to get to Keeneland next weekend. But I was curious to talk to you about, did you buy in 3 entries? Were you feeding in the whole way? Talk about your philosophy of how you use those feeder tournaments on DRFT. I think this idea that you've mentioned before about playing in some head-to-heads to offset the cost of your feeders and qualifiers. I think people understand that concept, but talk about your general approach to the feeders and qualifiers.
Yeah, I mean, I think people, like, on the surface, they look at that and they probably are like, that's kind of obnoxious. You bought 3 entries. That's not what happened. Last week or the week before, I had played a $95 feeder into the $410 qualifier. And I played one $95 feeder and a $100 head-to-head, and I won both of them. So I got 95 turned into 410, and then I also turned 100 into 200. And then I played last week on a Wednesday or Thursday and did the same thing. Qualified one in, and then won a head-to-head. And then I was trying to qualify my third one all last week, and both times I tried, I actually got breakage and got my $95 back for free. So essentially, I was like, well, what the heck? I've won these 2 head-to-heads. I'm in for $190 for $820 worth of entries. Let me go ahead and maximize this whole situation. And I went ahead and bought the 3rd entry. So I was in for, $1,230, but I only paid like $190 to do so ish, maybe give or take a little bit less after the head-to-head wins. So it made sense to me to be able to take advantage of that opportunity. Although when senseless horses win, I don't do well. And so,
I have a feeling we might be talking about some of those quote-unquote senseless horses as we go on in the day. It sounds like you had a rough weekend betting-wise in all. I know I did. For me, I've just come to a realization that I've gotten too far down. I've been drilling too far down into the idea of being a selection-oriented horse player and gotten too far away from the idea of being a value-oriented horse player. And I think those two things really need to exist in tandem more than they have for me lately, where I'm finding myself sort of over-leveraged, often to shorter-priced horses who aren't getting the job done for me. There was some bad luck as well for me, for sure, a bet that didn't go in. Just like random bad luck that would have been lucrative, and also some bankroll management issues. Just not betting enough, essentially, on the 2 races where I had good opinions, races that we talked about on the show on Friday, the Keeneland Futurity, and then also, of course, our friend Yoshida's win. Those 2 horses win for me in a day. I'm at least supposed to not lose. And I don't think I had strategized at the beginning of the day in terms of my bankroll. I've just been going along from race to race too much, betting what feels right in the moment as opposed to looking at it as a bigger part of a wagering plan. And then also just generally probably not working quite hard enough to justify the amount of money I have bet since Saratoga. So I've taken a couple of days since getting my teeth kicked in, especially on Sunday, to try to come up with some new ideas. And even though we're going to be at Keeneland this weekend, looking to not risk too much money, more going to make it a social fun weekend and continue to work on sort of a new wagering plan that I'll hopefully debut at the Breeders' Cup. For you, what was the source of your? I mean, is it as simple as a couple of senseless horses won, or was there anything you could learn from the not winning you did over the course of the week?
No, just senseless horses. I wasn't like, a lot of times when I'm trying to focus on getting into a live money tournament, like I was focused on trying to get into the Keeneland one to qualify in, I'm still going to play. I, especially for, like I said, $1,230 worth of entries, not to mention $320 in other areas to try to get qualified. I was in for $1,500 trying to get qualified. Like, that was my attention. That was where my focus was. That's the races I handicapped. Those are the, I had a wedding to go to that night. I mean, so I just worried about those 12 races. And so pari-mutually, I didn't really take any lumps, but no, I didn't, to answer your question, there was no mistake made. Looking back through it right now, there's just some horses I just wouldn't have had, and they can run again and I wouldn't have them,
We'll talk. I think you're talking about horses that we're going to be talking about anyway later in the show, so no need to go any farther than that. I will point out, though, that is not necessarily your. I totally get what you're saying about focusing on contests this weekend, but that's sort of a negative, in my view, negative stereotype that some people have about tournament players, as though they're just playing in tournaments. They're not playing at the windows. Two things about that. One, well, when somebody's focused on winning into a live bankroll tournament, that's not necessarily the worst thing in the world for the industry anyway, because once they get in that live bankroll tournament, that money's going to be turned over and folks in the industry are going to be getting their cut, for one thing. For another thing, that's not the usual way that it goes for you, is it? Usually,
no.
Not prevent cash.
I'm pardoned from those conversations. I do my fair share of pari-mutuel firing. So this was just a weekend where I was in intense daddy duty. Spent 2.5 hours at the rock climbing gym with the little fella, and then took a little break to kind of get some tournament action in order, and then had a wedding. So it was one of those situations where I just my bandwidth was stretched thin, and so I focused on one thing. You're right; it's not how I typically get down.
Speaking of daddy duty, I was playing Candyland with Perrin this morning before the show started. For some strange reason, she has off of school today, and at some point, I swear I saw her doing some sort of move where she was palming one of the cards on top so she could get to the ice cream floats or some better card beneath her. I didn't know whether to punish her or give her a pat on the back for becoming an advantage player.
That's good stuff. We're raising them. We're raising them right. So
no, I did. I came down pretty hard on her. I told her, it's all about how you got to play with integrity. That's sort of rule number one. It's not about, especially at the game level. It's all about. It's not about winning and losing. It's truly how you play the game. I think she learned her.
I'm probably in trouble for this. But I told Austin on Sunday, we were hanging out, and I said, we were going to watch a movie that night, blah, 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 because he didn't have school on Monday. And I said, listen, we were watching Unique Bella's race. And I said, in the middle of the race, and I said, if the number 5 wins, you can stay up until the 8s. And because he calls them the 8s. I don't really. And oh my God, he was honed in. He's like, she's not gonna win, Daddy. Oh, she's not gonna win. She's not gonna win, Daddy. She's not gonna. And then she won, and he was so shocked and thrilled. He's got no idea she was 1-9.
That's amazing. So he got to stay up till the 8s after all.
Yeah, I think he actually weaseled his way into the 9s. But
my goodness, now you're really gonna get in trouble.
Tough kid.
I told you we were going to start from East Coast to West, but since you brought it up and we need to segue, race you're talking about, of course, the LA Women's Stakes at Santa Anita, Grade 3. Unique Bella puts up a 96 Beyer speed figure in there and is certainly stamped as one of the favorites heading to the Filly and Mare Sprint. What do you think her chances are on the big day, JK?
I am going to welcome you guys into my text conversation that I had, the one we have with myself, Jack Jenkins, Travis Stone, Eric Bialik, and Philly Joe and Danny K, Dan Kovaleski, and we had a conversation about Unique Bella, and I rose the point that I get it. It's kind of crazy and a little bit silly but this is before the race happened, that this filly, off of all of this long break, kind of off this hype, is going to be a favorite in the Breeders' Cup Sprint, Filly Mare Sprint, if she wins this race. And I said, I get it. It is a little bit annoying, but I also think that it's kind of right. And I think she's probably going to win. She was running triple-digit buyers in the early part of her 3-year-old career, while a lot of these other horses are barely breaking that platform. And then I don't think Nick will have a problem with me sharing this. Nick, being Nick, essentially just kind of laid out all the reasons why I was an idiot and how she was like he goes, and he says to me, she is massively overrated. And I just kind of went through a rundown of the other horses in the division, and just bear with me for a second. By the Moon, okay, she ran 100 fig, but they went like 27 or 47 to the half in a 7-furlong race. Curlin's Approval, maybe. Finley's Lucky Charm, okay, I can get it. But then the rest of the list goes down for the probables, and I'm just not interested. Karina Mia's last race was terrible. Bar of Gold was mentioned. I don't know if she's going to run. Champagne Room, no thank you. Constellation's never run a triple-digit buyer. Finest City didn't break a triple-digit in her Breeders' Cup win last year, and she's been pretty bad this year. Highway Star, Paula Silver Lining, Sky Diamonds. I want none of these horses. It makes a ton of sense to me that this filly could progress and be a filly that makes sense being the favorite. And then Nick's response to my long, drawn-out text was, I'm just hopeful you keep feeding us 2-1 Breeders' Cup horses.
Unique Bella 2-1 right now, anti-post in the UK for the Filly and Mare Sprint. You left out a couple of names that are also favorites in the betting. I don't know if you have information, JK, about targets, or if you just hadn't mentioned them for some other reason. But right now, American Gal is listed in the betting at 6-1.
I think she's hurt.
She's hurt. And isn't Vale Dory?
So.
Vale Dory is skipping the race too, right?
Yeah, she got time. She's getting time off too.
Yeah, so those are the two that are listed also in single digits, along with Curlin's Approval, who you mentioned, and Finest City. Unique Bella as the 2-1 favorite. Dig for a little information on American Gal. Let's see if we can confirm that, because let me tell you, she's going to be a strong favorite if without those two in the race.
Yeah, let me see. I thought she was, but I'm not seeing the ad, so I don't want to. Maybe I'm wrong, but I thought she was.
Okay,
I'll keep looking.
If she's in the mix, that's certainly. Let's put it this way: if she's not in the mix, that 2-1 estimate is too high. Unique Bella will be shorter than that. I would imagine, based on the rest of that list. But anyway, we have plenty of time.
Yeah, the last time she worked was August 28th, so I would assume that
something's up.
Yeah,
something's up, and it ain't good. Yeah. So, all right. Well, we started there. While we're on the Santa Anita card from Sunday, was there anything else? Was there anything else out there that we wanted to talk about? I don't think so. Maybe we'll go back to the other side of things, as we originally said we were going to do, and start looking at Belmont on Saturday. And our discussion should start with Firenze Fire for Jason Service at 11-1, a horse I assume was in most of your contests. Is this one of the senseless horses whose win you were decrying earlier, JK?
This one wasn't senseless.
Yeah, I was going to say that would be a little harsh.
Yeah, it wasn't. I mean, the horse won the. What race did he win at Saratoga?
One of those 2-year-old races. I can't remember which one off the top of my head.
I'm pulling it up right now. Yeah, he won the Sanford. So
Sanford. I that was the one that popped into the head, but I didn't want to say it and be wrong.
Yeah, so it wasn't senseless. I just didn't. I didn't expect that to happen. I expected some of the other horses to run better than they did. It was an interesting situation with the horse that I wanted to single. I'm going blank on the names all of a sudden. I don't know why.
Good Magic.
The chef, Good Magic,
You
right?
said you were going to say
It was all in, like it was weird, like all in, like at the turn, but kind of kept finding, and it was just a kind of a weirdly run
Sounds
race.
a lot like another Chad Brown Juvenile winner on the weekend, who I'm sure we'll get to.
Right, and then I guess we were right about Has It. I thought the most disappointing horse was probably the I don't know why I even did this to myself.
Avinu Malkeinu, come on.
Thank you, Avinu. I live in Texas. Hard. It's like a Jewish thing, right?
It is.
I didn't really even know there was such thing as Judaism until like my brother married a Jewish girl like 15 years ago. I had no idea. Like it wasn't something that took place it's not something that was prominent in the community I grew up in.
Even in Austin? Well, I guess you didn't grow up in Austin.
Well, I grew up in like the suburbs of Dallas. I mean, I guess it was. I just wasn't socially aware then. I don't know. So.
It's phonetic. It's basically a phonetic name. It's not like I'm getting upset with you for not knowing how to pronounce Shok when it looks like Shabak. It's Avinu Malkeinu. It's right there.
All right, that's fair.
Anyway, Avinu Malkeinu ran about half a race. Do you think it was the distance that found him out?
I don't think it was that.
Craig did not have the pace coded for what that's worth. Talking about Craig Milkowski, the time-form U.S. crack figure maker who we've had on the show times and had the pleasure of working with on various handicapping sessions. Wise 109 on time form for Forense Fire, and I'll pull up the Beyer figure momentarily here. I had it ago, and then of course I clicked the wrong button. But it was certainly a solid win, and one that's going to turn a lot of heads, I would think, when it comes to the Breeders' Cup. Where are you? It was a 90 Beyer speed figure, so those are roughly equivalent, the 108 time form and the 90 Beyer. Seems like a horse to keep on the radar at the very least. Do you disagree?
Yeah, the radar. I mean, the tricky thing about the Champagne, and as well as the Frisette, is that they're one-turn races, so they don't answer that question. The front runner, the Alcibiades, the front runner, the
Don't you mean the Alcibiades, JK?
Alcibiades, yeah, and the Futurity, they all kind of give you a little bit more of a feel for if a horse is going to handle two turns. That doesn't really answer that question. So, yeah, I mean, it's not a toss for me, but I'm also like not ready to cut line to bet on the horse.
No, certainly not. I think I'm going to probably what will supersede everything for me is my aforementioned idea of being against dirt horses from the east going to the west. Current prices, I won't give them all away because one of them is actually pretty appealing here. But right now, 15-8 favorite betting in the UK, Bolt Doro, which certainly feels short enough, but not unreasonable. Forense Fire, 16-1 available right now, which, if you made me say, I'd say overpriced slightly, but not something that I'm, as you said, JK, looking to cut in line to bet when it comes to the Breeders' Cup and the BC Juvenile Dirt. Let's continue looking at the Belmont races on Saturday. I feel like we should have more to celebrate when we're talking about Yoshida's win, given how much we've talked about the horse on the pod. Ends up with a 96 Beyer speed figure, 123 on the time form scale. Maybe some anxious moments there, went in tight in the stretch, but really never had to stop riding and finished best and got the job done. What was your take on Yoshida?
I thought he ran well. I think he's hopefully going to keep progressing to turn out to be a pretty good horse. I'm a little bit, I guess I'm a little bit concerned moving forward that he's become kind of a horse that needs a certain type of trip, meaning a trip with cover. And so that's a little bit concerning because, what if he doesn't get cover? So he's not going to win if he doesn't get cover. And so that's a little bit of an issue, but I still think he's ultimately one of the most talented 3-year-old turf horses that we have here in this country. So hopefully he'll find a spot to run in the Breeders' Cup. I've heard mention of possibly the mile or possibly something else. So we'll see where he shows up. It's weird. I know what you're talking about. When a horse you've been chasing forever wins at 4-1, and you kind of have that moment of like, God, you're supposed to score out there. I really don't have a sour taste in my mouth because I'm a multi-race player. and I saved money because there is no way I was going to have Frenze fire, and I would have got beaten there. I would have made a big wager, and I would pick 3 or a pick 4 or a double coming into Yoshida or with Yoshida in the middle of it, and I would have lost anyway. So it kind of, I'm almost relieved to a certain extent.
That makes sense. Yoshida currently listed at 10-1 for the Breeders' Cup Mile. No, thank you. That's way too short as far as I'm concerned. Against, we'll see who shows up. I suppose if nobody shows up from Europe, I guess that suddenly becomes an interesting price. But with the likes of Ribchester and Winter in the betting right now, yeah, 10-1's a little bit light for our old friend Yoshida when you just had 4-1 restricted against other 3-year-olds. Blanket finish there. Interesting note with Craig's pace adjusted figures, the time form figures. 5 horses in that race, JK, within a point. Yoshida earning a 123 from Craig. Then Lucullen, Bricks and Mortar, Frostmorn, and Secretary at War all earning 122s once the pace adjustment was applied. What does that tell you about the race, generally speaking?
The Matisse brothers call it a salad bowl finish, where which I had to it's a big a bunch of horses just at the very end of the race. And
sort of like toss them up in a salad and throw them up in the air and see where they fall. That kind of
it's not typically an endorsing tag that they would put on a race. So I don't know. I mean, he had a lot of trouble. He was kind of stuck in behind. It was a bumpy, rough finish. But no, it doesn't make
a lot of trouble. See, I think you kind of in that spot, like it wasn't an easy trip, but it's like you either get run. A lot of trouble is he never gets through to make his run. Like, I don't know how much I'd upgrade that, honestly. Like a little, but he was obviously stuck in a vice for a little while and maybe would have made it look a little bit easier. And I guess maybe run a little bit faster, but I don't know. I don't know if I go with a lot of trouble. I think it was
I agree.
Representative of his ability right now.
No, I don't think it was I felt like it was a roughly run ending to the race.
Yeah,
and he did have to kind of have some courage to go through that hole. And
definitely.
So I wouldn't give him like a massive upgrade, but I would give him an upgrade.
I would say he's probably better. He's probably more than a neck better than the horses that he finished ahead of. I'll give you that. But it's not like, oh, he had so much trouble, I'm dying to bet him in the Breeders' Cup Mile at 10-1.
Agreed.
Buyer speed figure, just for the record, on Yoshida, 96. That comes in at. So relatively speaking, considerably lower, I'd say, on the buyer scale than on the time form scale for what that's worth. And then let's move on to our final race that we were going to talk about from Belmont on Saturday, and that was the Jockey Club Gold Cup. Diversify getting the job done, 107 on the buyer scale, 128 for time form. What did you think of this race?
Yeah, I mean, I thought that this was a perfect example, and I tweeted about it right after. We've been talking about, it's kind of been a theme we've talked about, I feel like, every episode since Hawkbill, where you have to, there's a sweet spot with a speed horse of going too fast and going too slow. And if you can find that middle ground, that's your best advantage. And I think that Irad did that perfectly with Diversify. He went fast enough to get the horses off the bridle. He went fast enough to have Keen Eyes far enough away from him. But he also went slow enough to save a little bit in reserve, and Keen Eyes couldn't beat him. I think if you go 2/5 of a second faster or 2/5 of a second slower, and Keen Eyes would have beaten him. He just found that perfect middle ground that made the difference for him to get home. And that's just my basic opinion of it. I thought it was a brilliant ride, and I want nothing to do with that horse moving forward. Hope he shows up in the Breeders' Cup and cooks it up a little bit and helps with the pace situation. And Keen Eyes did nothing to make me feel less comfortable betting him underneath second and third in the Breeders' Cup Classic.
You didn't leave much meat on that bone. You said it perfectly. I'll just return to that analogy of the visual analogy of the line representing sort of the ideal pace during a race. I think Diversify rode that line just perfectly. not too far, not too slow, too far under it, not too far above it, going too fast. Just gave himself the chance to run that distance, to run that 1.25 mile distance as fast as he possibly could on the day. And yeah, I also agree with what you said about Keen Ice. Didn't really do anything to hurt my looking at him going forward. Looking ahead to the Breeders' Cup Classic and some prices available at the moment on the win end, both Diversify and Keen Ice at 40-1. Keen Ice as an underneath type play, definitely to me in that spot in a few weeks' time, the more appealing proposition. Diversify ends up getting the 107 buyer speed figure, 128 on the time form scale in the Jockey Club Gold Cup. Shall we move on to Keeneland?
We shall.
Excellent. And we'll start with, did you have anything to say about, well, let's talk about this, because this maybe is one of the so-called senseless horses. I know that doing the write-up on DRF tournaments for the weekend, I think Bucaro was on every winner's card of our big stuff except one on Saturday in the Woodford Stakes.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit of sour grapes, but I can't find that horse. You know what I mean? I played Hoagie, and then I also played Leighton Revenge on one entry, I think it was like 12-1, just 15-1 when they went off. And so, yeah, I mean, in hindsight, you get it. It's that whole turf sprint, speed of the speed thing, and I can find the argument that's made there.
Yeah, I mean, I said on the show, look, I'm not claiming I had the winner. I didn't. But I said on the show, like, I want to spread here. I want to use these horses, and I want to use whoever I think is going to be the best of the speed, the 2 or the 5. I mean, I actually don't know if I said out loud the 2 or the 5, but those were clearly the 2 who were going to be out there. And I'm not saying that. I'm not looking for any accolades in saying that. I'm just looking to say, like, for a contest player, speed, knowing that those potential speeds, one's 15-1, one's 26-1, I totally get the logic of I've got 2 entries. I'm going to use one on Bucaro, one on Leighton Revenge.
Yeah, and I'm the guy that had 3 entries and used 2 on Hoagie and 1 on Leighton Revenge. So, I don't know. That was one that kind of hurt. And the other thing that's frustrating is, like, that wasn't the trip that if I would have played Bucaro, that's not the trip that I thought he would have won with.
You would have thought he would have just gone to the lead?
Yeah, I thought it would have been a wire situation, like, which I thought Leighton Revenge was about to do at a certain point during the race when he was 5 clear, and that
5 clear after a quarter.
he got a little bit sleepy, but
he got late, and Bucaro got the de facto lone front runner trip.
Yeah, no, and you're right. Yeah, and so, yeah, I mean, looking at it again, it's probably not as unlikely as it might have appeared to be when I was cursing at the TV on Saturday. But this isn't the type of horse that I look to bet moving forward. He feels like one of those turf sprinters that won because everything kind of fell in his lap that day, and it's not likely that would happen again. But you never know. He ran well.
Not even listed in the betting at the moment. 98 buyer speed figure. I don't know if you have the time form in front of you for that one. I haven't shifted over to the Keeneland screen yet in that regard.
124.
Okay. So faster on time form, more or less, but not one that either of us are that excited about going forward for Breeders' Cup purposes, and not even listed in the betting as of yet, though I imagine that will change as things get updated this week. You mentioned Finley's Lucky Charm before, and the TCA. She gets the job done with a 94 on the buyer speed figure scale. Doesn't sound like you're too interested, though, going forward. Any other deconstruction of this race that you feel like making?
No, I mean, I think she kind of had an obstacle of a trip. She didn't start all that well. She ran well enough. Budget buyer, is she triple digit buyer?
She got a 94 and a 114 on time form, so that matches up.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, she was fine. Like I said, I thought she ran well. I guess the biggest surprise for me in that race was I kind of started to get interested in Vertical Oak as it went on, as it got a little bit closer. And she I think she might have had an issue. She like
There was trouble on the turn.
eased. Yeah,
Yeah,
I don't know if
she lost
so.
her action and wasn't asked. I didn't see what exactly happened there, but yeah, it didn't look certainly didn't look good for her.
Yeah, and then Ivy Bell, who was kind of my pick, she scratched at the gate when she reared and kind of fell back on her hind end. So, yeah, I mean, Finley's Lucky Charm ran well. She's a really nice filly. She's been doing this for about a year now as a sprinter. She's been pretty impressive. So, I think she'll probably take a little bit of money at Breeders' Cup just with all those ones in her PPs.
Fair enough, but I must say, at the risk of incurring Nick Tamaro's ire, I might just be sucking the chalk with you if those are the two big horses in the market in that case. with Unique Bella. All right, First Lady Zapessa gets the job done. What did you think of this one? Is this another one that you were that you couldn't see after the race, or one you feel like you maybe missed something, or discuss?
This was a little bit annoying because people that play tournaments understand that this is one of those situations where it's a short field. There's 7 horses in the race. A couple races before that, and I think this is even after, chronologically, it was after the Champagne with Firenze Fire winning, and then Bucaro winning or whatever. Now people are like, okay, well, which horse is 15-1? Okay, I'll take that one. And that's what it felt like a lot in this spot, with people just using Zapessa because she wasn't 5-1 like Hawksmoor, 2-1 like Roca Rojo, 2-1 like Donna Bruja, and 5-2 like Dickinson. Here we go. And of course, Sour Grapes again. I'm the idiot that was trying to do the same thing and pick the European horse who finished last. So maybe it's a frustration and annoyance. I mean, I thought she ran okay.
It was a surprise. The pace situation was surprising. I would have thought this would be a race that would have been coded red, if not neutral. Instead, ends up getting blue to 6 furlongs, with Dickinson employing rating tactics on the day, Hawksmoor being loose, more or less, and Zapessa sort of getting the perfect trip, sitting in behind, if I'm remembering the race right.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they run the race again. Hawksmoor's supposed to win that, right? I mean, if we talk about it and we have a crystal ball, we say, hey, they're going to go 114 to the 6 furlong pole, and Hawksmoor is on the lead. What do you think is going to happen? She's going to win. That's
draw.
And then I thought it was a little bit curious that, and it's frustrating at times, but maybe just can't change their style. But why Donna Bruja and Roca Rojo were so far back in that situation was a little bit frustrating. I bet Donna, or I picked Donna Bruja in the thing, try to make up a little bit of ground, because I can't remember who I liked late. There's a price that I liked late, and so I just wanted to try to make up a little bit of ground so that I could try to get there and reach with that price. And it just I was going to play flatlined in the Shadowell Turf Mile, so I just wanted to keep making up ground, because I felt like that was the long shot that I wanted to play, not just some senseless long shot early that's 15-1 because it's 15-1, and obviously that didn't work out. And
you are bitter about Zapessa, man.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's one of the things that's it can be frustrating about tournaments, and a lot of people that don't like tournaments, they say 2 things. They don't like multiple entries, which I think is silly, and they hate the fact that people just stab late. Those are the 2 biggest complaints in tournaments. So I'm not mad at people for doing it, but it is frustrating when it happens to
you. Yeah, I mean, you might as well outlaw the Hail Mary in football too, though.
Right? It's just frustrating. Like for sports bettors, the people that whoever bet that game the other night where Kansas City picked up that fumble and covered and scored that ridiculously irrational touchdown. It's a bad beat. It's unfortunate and it's frustrating, but it doesn't mean that they shouldn't be able to do that. You know what I mean? It's annoying.
It does seem like I'll give you this. Zapessa was the beneficiary. He ran very well. Was the beneficiary of an unexpected, impossible to predict perfect trip.
Absolutely, and she didn't even. To me, Hawksmoor got the perfect trip.
Right. That's right. Hawksmoor probably had the more perfect trip. So,
and got beat.
So credit to Zapesa for you could upgrade in that sense if you wanted. Beyer and Timeform line up pretty well on this one. 100 on the Beyer scale, 122 on Timeform. I'm assuming now it is a little bit interesting. It seemed like a year where the First Lady could be more of a prep race than usual for the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Turf, simply because at Del Mar, the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Turf is going to be a mile and an eighth, not the usual longer. What is it typically? A mile and a quarter. And sometimes I think it's even been longer than that. So in theory, this race could produce a contender for it, but I'm not really ready to do jumping jacks about Zepesa's chances.
No, I would think Hawksmoor shows up there.
Yeah, Hawksmoor could be interesting, but
I mean,
we'll see.
She
I mean,
wanted
it
a
sounds
mile
like
and a
Aiden O'Brien
quarter.
might have half the field, and if we know he's not against using team tactics, so there won't be any easy leads for Hawksmoor. Let's put it that way. They'll be going as fast as Aiden O'Brien wants them to go.
Winter is coming. That's a question.
Not just an excuse to get another Game of Thrones reference in there. I think it depends. Winter is scheduled to run, I believe, on Champions Day. And I'm not sure if she's going to run at the Irish Champion going longer, going a mile and a quarter, or if she's going to run at a mile in the QE2. They also have Churchill, who they're trying to figure out what to do with. So it's a real guessing game. But I would assume if they run well there, both of those horses will come over for different targets. I would think Churchill maybe even for the Classic, if not the Classic, the mile. And Winter could also run in the mile or could run in the Filly and Mare. They'll have to. It's going to be a big hurry up and wait and see. It is true this year the Champions Day at Ascot is only 2 weeks before the Breeders' Cup, but that was also the case in 2015 when we saw O'Brien run Found and still come back in 2 weeks and win the Breeders' Cup Turf. So I don't think that rules anything out in terms of what O'Brien may or may not send come Breeders' Cup weekend. Obviously, there's going to be a lot more news and information on that. Check out the excellent reporting by Marcus Hirsch, Steve Anderson on the DRF website. We'll also be keeping eyes on the story and we'll be reporting on it, analyzing it more than reporting on it here on the podcast. And speaking of the Breeders' Cup Mile, the Shadwell Turf Mile, David O'Mara, less fancied of his two runners, Suédoise, who I just completely whiffed on, ends up winning the thing with a 105 Beyer speed figure. Did you see the case for this horse?
No, I didn't see the case for that horse at all. And I'll be running in the other direction for anyone who ran in this race come Breeders' Cup.
Why do you say that?
A 105 time form for a grade 1.
Yeah, that's.
There's like first level allowance horses that run 105s. Oh, it's a 125. I thought you said a 105.
105 is the Beyer.
105 is the Beyer. 125.
Yeah, sorry.
Well, I'm not as bullish then. That's my fault. I'm not as bullish, but at the same time, my initial reaction was I didn't want any of these horses. The only horse that I would maybe give another shot, I'm a little bit disappointed that the horse didn't win, was Heart to Heart. I could see myself getting a little bit kind of interested in Heart to Heart. And then Baller Rocks has a little bit of that tourist feel to me. He's the type of horse that if he shows up there, he's training well, everything's going the right direction. He's one that I could see using as like a B horse at like 22-1 underneath all of the, and then underneath all the other horses. But that race is so hard to predict because you just don't know what you're going to get from the Europeans. If they send their A team, then we should probably pay attention. If they send their B team, we should probably pay attention. So,
that's would have been squarely on the C team, and he got it done the other day. So it's
exactly.
It does it, but I like your point about Ballarux. It's the old Bill Mott with a target angle that does give you a little bit of reason to want to get involved at a huge number. One thing interesting looking at the Timeform USPPs, seeing that the 7 furlongs in the race is coded red. I kind of thought visually, I might have even called it in real time a no finish trip by Heart to Heart, the kind of trip after which I'm not interested at all. in a horse running back. But it is interesting to see at least that he had the excuse maybe of cutting out some faster internal fractions that took the sting. That took the sting out of the finish. So I just don't know about any of these horses in Breeders' Cup terms. Again, I just think you're going to be seeing some stronger stuff. I realized I skipped over a race. We had that perfect segue to go to the Shadwell Turf Mile, so I did. But in the process, I eliminated the opportunity to talk about Free Drop Billy, who ran a 79 Beyer speed figure in the Claiborne Breeders' Futurity. Is this an instance where the lowish figure doesn't bother you because of the potential upside the horse has, or are you thinking that and notable also that Timeform had the race faster at a 104 rating from Craig? What kind of view are you taking of this race coming out of it?
Yeah, it's a little bit weird. It doesn't sound like things ended well for 10 City. It looked like 10 City had run when it went wrong, and it looked like Free Drop Billy was in a little bit of trouble. At least at one point, I remember I used 10 City as like a reach on another entry, and for a second I was like, this horse might get there. So it was a weirdly run race. It felt weird. The number's not that high, so I'm wanting to think it was a little bit fraudulent.
Fraudulent in what sense?
In terms of the fact that I don't think it was like, I don't think the Breeders' Cup winner is coming out of that race.
Okay.
I don't, he won by 4, but when I say fraudulent, when a horse usually wins by 4 in a grade 1, it's kind of a open up your eyes and look. I'm not really sure that was that situation. What was the Beyer you said?
It was low, like really low, even lower than the time. You were just saying about how maidens get the 105 time form, which is actually faster than what that race got, and then it's even slower on Beyer, cut it all the way back to 79. That's 11 fewer Beyer points than Firenze Fire got, and slower than some maiden winners over the weekend.
Yeah, I wonder if there's like a timing issue. I'm looking at Craig's Twitter to see if he has any notes on that. If you ever have a question about a figure, and I hate to just volunteer him up like that, but I think he's worth a tweet at. He usually will respond at you too if he's got any ideas.
If he's responding to you, JK, he's clearly responding to everybody, so that is good advice.
Well, we used to get along really well when Kevin Durant was there. No, we still get along just fine, but he's not. I don't think Kevin Durant is getting any Christmas cards from Craig.
He is overdue for an appearance on the podcast. We'll have to bring him in. Let's talk about the Santa Anita Stakes action from Saturday before we move on to some of the stuff that went down on Sunday. What were the big ones out there, Jonathan? You were paying more attention than me.
Let's see. On Saturday. Yeah, it runs in I gotta look at it. Let's see.
It was the Sprint Championship, wasn't it?
Yes.
Wasn't that the race with Ransom the Moon and Roy H?
It was, and it was the race where my opinion was bad. Ransom the Moon was awful. He didn't run at all. He was in a kind of a good spot. Really didn't have any trouble. There was no distinct pace situations going on, and he just wasn't very good. American Anthem, I think we found out that's just a little bit too short for him. It was a nice comeback race, and I would imagine that there's a race they usually run. They usually run like a 7 furlong listed stake on Breeders' Cup Day. I would imagine he'll show up in a spot like that on the undercard, and he'll be a horse that I'll be looking to bet in that situation. I also think that he's right now, if we can get an anti-post bet down on him to win the Malibu, I would be excited to do so. I think that, on his home court, Practical Joke, I would imagine, might show back up for that spot. Talkaful maybe even too, but I would want American Anthem able to kind of rate going 7 furlongs like that. And Roy H was good. He ran really well. However, he's not exactly who I want when there's going to be more speed in that situation going 6. Horses like Talkaful and El Deal and to kind of help cook it up a little bit. I don't want a deep closer, but I do want a horse I think that can kind of maybe sit off of it and finish.
So Roy H gets a nice number on the buyer scale, 110. Interestingly, you talked about timing issues before. No numbers from Craig yet, suggesting maybe there was something going on there, and he's going to go back and hand time and take a look at that again. So we'll keep our eyes on that. So what about Ransom the Moon, a horse you previously put up for the Breeders' Cup Sprint? Is this too bad to be believed and now you get twice the price, or is this you don't want to touch with a 10-foot pole?
No, I think it's one of those wait and see. Like, okay, a couple of things that I like to do in these situations is definitely hop on DRF and read. It's really not a shameless plug. I'm being dead serious. Jump on there and read the after interviews and hear what D'Amato has to say. Then read the interviews kind of leading up to it to see what D'Amato has to say. He had a little bit of an issue, blah, 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 kind of wanted to, whatever. You want to hear the story. And then because he's a West Coast horse, you'll have ample opportunity to see, watch, and observe workout situations and see how he's coming into the race. And then, see where he draws and see how the pace lines up. Obviously, it should be pretty quick. He's definitely one that I would include. If he shows up in the gate, I think by my opinion of him prior to this situation, he's going to be an A horse for me.
Wow. So for a second there, it sounded like you had, you were still on the bandwagon, but one foot was dangling off the back gate. But now that you're talking about an A horse, I think you're in the middle of the bandwagon, sitting on the bale of hay, holding on for dear life.
No, I think a lot of times when situations like that, I'm looking for horses that I can lean on, like really lean on and make my day around. And Practical Joke is a great example of one of those horses in the past that I've done that. American Pharaoh, the Beast Arrow, like all these different horses where I try to lean on them as my strong opinion of the day and build around them. Ransom the Moon, I am on the fence now if he's that type of horse, and I'm leaning towards jumping over the fence to the no, he's not. But he is still the type of horse I would use as an A horse in a situation where I have 3 or 4 A horses.
Well, we all need someone we can lean on. Well spoken, JK. I like it. Before we move from Saturday, there was another race that I skipped over quickly but was won by a horse who has the potential to be single-digit odds in the Breeders' Cup, which is sort of my go-to for which races we're talking about from the weekend. Disco Partner wins again, currently installed in the betting at 8-1. Did you get a chance to see that race? I think it was probably too early to be in any of your tourneys, but just curious if you had any general thoughts on that horse.
I didn't see it, and ironically enough, this is a horse that when I was at Saratoga hanging out with the Prince of Keeneland, we were on the backside and we ran into Christoph, and we talked to him about this horse, and he was really excited about him, and he was hopeful that the owners would supplement, and I think that they're going to.
That's right, because he's not nominated, so they would have to supplement. But that's interesting. That's a story to follow. What do you think about a tight 5 at Del Mar for this horse? I mean, I think it's going to work against a lot of the European horses we're talking about coming over. Does that mean it's going to play into the hands of somebody like Disco Partner, or is it going to be more beneficial to some of the? We already talked about the Keeneland Turf Sprint. It didn't sound like you were over the moon about anybody for the Breeders' Cup coming out of that one. Where does that leave you with Disco Partner?
Ironically enough, he's never run 5. He's run 5.5 twice, and the 2 times he ran 5.5, he came from off of it and won one and was flying late in the other one. So, I mean, he's definitely one that I could see kind of being the type that could close going 5. He's a talented horse. He'll have finish there. The draw will be important for him. I would want to see him like 6, 7, 8, 9 so that he can circle. I don't want him in behind horses. So he's definitely one that I would consider in a situation like that, because that's going to be a weirdly bet race. Because I have a feeling that Lady Aurelia is going to be bet off the board.
Yeah, she's 11-8 now, Lady Aurelia.
Right. So she's going to be bet off the board internationally. And here in America, she's going to be bet. She's going to be an Ascot darling that will continue to take money. And so I think there's going to be some opportunities there, especially in a situation like where at 5, you can't really make mistakes. You missed the break by a step, or there's no mistakes that can be had going 5. So he's definitely one. Yeah, he's definitely the one that I would be considering using as an alternative.
All right, makes sense. We have a couple other races to talk about. I know we had 2 from Belmont on Sunday. I got caught up in the hype train on Grand Jeté. Now, I know we've said 1,000 times on this show, with as much as we complain about jockeys who aren't aggressive, we really shouldn't complain about a jockey who is too aggressive. However, that said, I could not help but feeling a little bit like the ride on Grand Jeté was too clever by half. And if they had it to do over again, I might have liked to see a different approach. Am I the world's worst hypocrite, JK? Feel free to blast me.
No, you're not a hypocrite. I agree with you. It was probably a little bit too cheeky for me, but it was, like I said, I can't knock. It's just it doesn't sit well for me to knock aggressive rides when I want to jump off of a roof when they do it the other way. You know what I mean? It's like you just got to kind of deal with it.
I guess I just felt like the other horse, Zhukova, was not a horse you were likely to gut and would have taken the lead. So I kind of just wanted to be behind that one, if not behind anybody else. But I guess I get it. You're at the rail. You're trying to come up with an ambitious plan. You think you have the best horse. Of course, as it turns out, neither of these horses end up winning the race. Talk about give us your overall analysis, and then we'll talk a little more specifics going forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think War Flag's a nice filly. I didn't think she was going to win. I thought if Grand Jeté didn't get it done, it was going to be DeCita or Zhukova. And so when those situations happen, it can be a little bit confusing. I don't want her necessarily moving forward, but I think she's going to be a useful type, winning a lot of races for the Shug McGahee barn down the road. Look, I mean, like I told you on Saturday, this is something that could work out better. I mean, if Grand Jeté still gets in, which I think she probably will off of her races in North America, I think she'll get in anyways. And if she does, she'll be the price that you want. She'll probably be 8, 9, 10 to 1 in that spot off of her last two.
I would think in UK betting, it's going to be way bigger than that if that's an option for you. Interestingly, on Craig's coding, it was only the mile that got the red from Timeform, suggesting it was too fast to the mile. I might have guessed visually that you would have seen the 6 furlong coded that way as well. But I guess the way he adjusts the fractions, that was not the case. Grand Jeté may be a horse who, if you were going to want to take her and think about betting her going forward for a race like the Filly and Mare, part of your theory, I'm assuming, Jonathan, would be that she is one of these horses who's better with cover.
Yeah, I think she won't do that again.
Yeah, I think that's a safe bet.
Yeah, I don't think she'll do that again. So yeah, no, I think that she's definitely one, and Javier was just probably trying to not do what Joel did. He probably got the instruction, do not get her stopped. Right. And maybe that wasn't clear enough. And he's like, okay, well, if I put her on the front, I can't get her stopped. So.
Well, not stopped in that sense.
Right, exactly.
I don't even see her in the betting right now, which is surprising. But if she were to turn up over there, if we were to get some positive information about her going forward, just that she's still pointed to the race, and if it looks like she was going to get in, at a mid-20s price over there, I hear what you're saying. It wouldn't necessarily be the craziest step. It's just an impossible race from here to know who's going to come between what O'Brien is or isn't going to send, and then between which of his are going to be in this race as opposed to the mile. It's just like no point in speculating even right now. But War Flag's 20, just to give you some idea, and Sapessa listed as 33.
I think the tote board tells a really interesting story with these two fillies with DeCita and Grand Jeté. Going into the Beverly D, Grand Jeté was half the price of DeCita. DeCita wins. They come back into this race, and Grand Jeté is a quarter of the price of DeCita. Well, someone has a very strong opinion of Grand Jeté.
Yeah, that's for sure. But it also does speak to the point I was getting at before about how my horse playing has become too selection oriented and not value oriented enough. The fact that at that, with that point you exactly just made, and to have, granted, it wouldn't have worked out, Decida didn't win, but the fact that all my eggs were in the Grand Jeté basket at evens versus 4-1 on Decida, who ends up beating her, that's the kind of thing I'm talking about when I'm saying I don't want to be quite so selection oriented going forward. Was there anything else from Santa Anita you want to hit quickly? I do want to get to this one Breeders' Cup question that we had come in. We've got about 6 minutes left. That race that's often a prep for the juvenile turf was this weekend, the Zuma Beach. I didn't even get a chance to see it yet. Did you get a chance to check that out? My boy Jack getting the job done with an 80 Buyer Speed figure.
I didn't even watch those races.
Okay, well, we'll talk about that division as we get closer, as we know who's coming in. We'll do some retroactive analysis on that one. With that, JK, I think we're ready to move on to this question, unless you have anything else in terms of specific races from the weekend.
No, let's do it.
Okay, so the question was, one of our listeners asked, says he's got $1,000 bankroll to spend. This is distinct from the ring bet, by the way, which we will return to a discussion of as we get closer. But this player has $1,000 and was asking for advice on how to allocate it throughout Breeders' Cup weekend. My question back to him that I haven't heard the answer to yet was, well, what's your goal? Are we talking about having action and fun and maybe making a little money? Are we talking more of a ring bet scenario where you're looking to either, put that 1,000 as your entertainment budget and lose, and that's fine, but if you win, you want to, win 10,000? What's your, before we can really answer the question, we need to know that, but what's your general response, Jonathan, to that idea?
I mean, for me, the way that I would do it, and this is just a quick outline, is I would split it up into 4 amounts. And I would pick 4 spots that I want to participate in. So I would do like a $350 bet, a $250 bet, and then 2 $200 bets to equal your $1,000. And then I would just play where, like, my strongest kind of opinion or my strongest play, I would obviously spend the $350 on. For me, it would be something like a late pick 4 or a pick 3 sequence where I really love 2 horses that are involved in that sequence or whatever it is. And then have a lesser version of it with $250, and then, your $200 plays in other places. I would focus on making 4 plays throughout the weekend. I think so often we get tied into like feeling like we have to bet every race because it's the Breeders' Cup, and it's just not the case. The answer that I would do in that situation, or one of those $200 bets, I would take $100 of that and play in a tournament on DRF tournaments where you could actually have action on every race, and then focus your big plays on opportunity. Because what happens is if you take $100 and you bet 10 races, you're just going to end up like even. I mean, you bet 100, you lose, you miss it. You're gonna. I mean, if you're lucky, you're going to end up even. So, my opinion is to spend more on the things that you think are going to happen, and then those will be your 4 big plays, and then find another way, like I said, through DRF tournaments or something, getting involved in a pick and pray or whatever, and all in for the day, and then let it unfold from there, where you can actually have action on that random Breeders' Cup race where you kind of like the 22-1 shot, but you're not betting your $350 involved in that situation.
I love that idea, getting action through tournaments. Potentially, you might even want to spend the whole 1,000. It just depends on where your opinions are. I love JK's idea of allocating it. Maybe even my gut even goes to maybe cutting it down into fewer than 4 buckets, just depending on where those strongest opinions are. Also, your wagering personality comes into play. Are you a vertical player? Are you a horizontal player? For me, I love the idea of maybe taking shots at allocating that certain portion to tournaments, so you're hopefully getting your action, taking care of that way. And then if you like the pick 4, if you're a pick 4 type player and you have opinions late each day, maybe just spending the rest, either picking one day or the other and going after it, or dividing and taking 2 shots there. And then some of it depends on if you're more into it for action, maybe you'd want more than 4 buckets if you're more into it to try to make money, I think JK's plan, or even a tighter version of JK's plan, might make sense, with tournaments being the way that you can continue to have a fixed amount of money situation where you're going to get action throughout an entire day. It's one of the absolute best things about tourneys.
Because the thing about it is that if that idea to you makes your stomach turn a little bit, 350, 250, 200, 200, and you're like no, that's only 4 plays though. Like, what if then you're really you're just cementing my theory that the reason that you don't want to do that is because you're looking for action. You want to be involved in the other races. And the fact that it's a Breeders' Cup and you're not involved, that's the problem that's making your stomach turn. So that's why I think it's important to realize that my point being is to find a different way to take care of that situation so that you can actually make smart and intelligent financial investments through the opinions that you have on the weekend. Because if you bet 350 to an opinion, 250 to an opinion, 200 and 200 into opinion, if you are right, you will make money.
Yeah. No, I love that.
You only need 4 to 1 to break even. So you only need 4 to 1 on your opinion to break even of your 4 opinions. And if you're playing multi-race situations or you're playing exactas or trifectas, you're going to get your 4 to 1 without a doubt.
Just to underline why tournaments are such a great idea for action, the controlled cost, the length of time, and you're paying takeout once. In a tournament, you're paying takeout. You're potentially getting whatever it is, 12 races of action, and you're paying 1 takeout. Whereas if you're just taking $10 a race or whatever and playing 12 races for the same 120 you might have put into the tournament, you're paying takeout every time. The chances of you just getting ground down to a nub go through the roof.
Right.
Speaking of tournaments, got to say this for our Tuesday only listeners. Huge opportunity Friday night on DRF tournaments. It's the Everest tournament. It's a free roll to win a trip for you and a guest to Australia in April. One of the biggest, coolest prizes we've ever offered on DRF tournaments. Going to have some, yes, you can be like JK and just pick your favorite number or pick numbers out of a hat and play it that way. If you want to learn a little something about form study, going to be having a special handicapping session Thursday early evening. I think it's going to be 5 o'clock. I'm going to do this handicapping session, and then I'm going to jump on a plane. We're going to have an Aussie form expert in the house, just waiting to confirm that, to go over all the races that are going to be part of that tournament. Starts Friday night at 10. I'm also hopefully going to be talking to another Aussie form expert who folks will certainly be familiar with his voice, Peter Berry, going to be doing an article this week on Wednesday with him doing sort of a Q&A going over the races. So you can start your form study there. We will have PPs. Should be an awesome chance and a great opportunity on DRFT. I was kidding around about picking numbers out of a hat. Will you try to study the form a little bit for this, Jonathan?
I'm going to study the form, but I'm gonna have some rules to doing it. It is my son's birthday.
Okay.
People who have seen the tattoo on my forearm, it's saddle cloths of my son's birthday, 10, 13, 11. So what I will do is I will look at every race, and I will pick the horses that I pick have to be the 10, the 13, or the 11. So I'm just going to look at those 3 horses and pick the one I like the most of those 3. So every selection of mine will be a 10, a 13, or an 11. If there is no 10, 13, or 11 in the race, then I'll just pick the 6 because that's his 6th birthday. So those are the only numbers I'll be using.
I love it. I love it. Way to cut down on your work. All right, we are out of time. Thanks, JK. Some really good stuff today. Look forward to talking more with you about the Breeders' Cup and everything going on in the world of horse racing. Of course, most of all, I want to thank all of you for tuning in and listening, whether you're doing it live. You can go to Spreaker.com, sign up for DRF Players Podcast, sign up live there. You can get the show downloaded if you go to iTunes and go to DRF Players Podcast. You can have the show appear directly on your phone or other listening device. That's it. That's all we got. I'm Peter Thomas Fornatel. We'll be back on, one special announcement. Back on Thursday this week, special Thursday show at 11 to account for our travel plans going to Keeneland for this weekend. So if you're a live listener, be on the lookout Thursday at 11. We will see you then. May you win all your photos.